I'm teaching you how to create this smoky eye. Let's go. I start off every eye look with something called a transition shade. For me, this is going to be something that is light, warm, and neutral. You can use whatever shade tone that you want depending on what look you're going for. But for me, that is what I look for. So today I'm going to use the shade Silk Cream from this Morphe and Jaclyn Hill palette. This specific palette is no longer available. However, I love Morphe palettes because you get so many shades, so you can find what transition shade you like for yourself, and you can just play around with different tones, shades, colors, things like that. I'm also going to be applying this with a BK Beauty brush. This is their number 201. I already applied the transition shade to this eye, but I just wanted to give you guys a before and after. Look how much more bigger and more open and wider this eye looks compared to this eye. A tip I have for all of us hooded eyed girls, even if they're just slightly hooded like mine, blend your shadows up higher to your brow. It's going to open up your eyes and make them look bigger and wider. How I apply my transition shade is I tilt my head back so I can look down into my mirror, exposing my eyelid. And I'm just going to start this in the center part of the crease. I usually just use stippling motions, and then I can tell how much product is on my brush by how much is coming off in this area. So this is just about the right amount. I like to work with a very small amount of makeup. Once I can tell how much product is there, I'm going to start moving this from the inner to outer corner, still down into my crease. Once I can tell I have blended that out nice and evenly like that, then I will start bringing this up onto my brow bone, towards the brow, towards the arch of the brow, and all the way out towards the tail end of my brow. I'm kind of using stippling motions, but I'm not lifting the brush off of my eyelid, so I'm kind of like mushing it like this, but moving at the same time. So you're going to work with whatever product is on your eye already. You're not going to keep picking up extra product. Just keep moving it around and blending it around until you feel like it is fully blended out. And then if you have any spots that need to be filled in, then grab a little extra product and fill them in at that point. I'm trying to do this in real time so you guys can see how much time it does take to just blend out your eyeshadows. It's not a bunch of time, but don't be afraid to take your time in blending out your shadows. It's not really a race. So for me, that is what I usually do. I would like to fill this part in a little bit more, just like on this side, create a little bit more depth. That's going to, again, make my eye look a little bit wider. So I grabbed a tiny bit of makeup here, and I'm just going to stipple it right onto the brow bone, up into the arch of the brow, just in this area, because I know that if I create a little bit more of a shadow here on my eye, personally, I feel like it makes my eye look bigger and wider because I'm recreating my crease up in this area rather than way down in here. So I always make sure I have enough product up here on the brow bone, because that's technically where I'm trying to trick the eye to believing that is where my crease is now at. I also don't think I mentioned, but I do take the eyeshadow all the way out past the tail end of my brow. What this does is just create my eye to look like it's a lot wider than it really is. So basically, a transition shade is what I use to recreate the shape of my eye. And now I know throughout any point of my eye makeup, I can grab my transition shade and blend out all my other shadows. Now, out of my Anastasia Soft Glam palette, I am going to pick up the shade Dusty Rose. I love using a mauve tone on blue eyes. Not only does it make them pop, but I also feel like it really ties in really any shadow or shade of blush. So what I'm going to do is use a BK 202 brush. I'm using actually the side of the brush rather than the tip of the brush. So I pick the makeup up like this. So now I'm going to apply it on my eye like this rather than the tip. So however you use your brush to pick up your makeup, that's how you're going to apply it to your eye. So this time I'm using the side of the brush. And what I'm going to do is, again, look my head back into the mirror, exposing my eye. And I'm starting this again in the center part of my crease for the same reasons. I want to see how much shadow and product is actually on my brush. I'm just going to use those stippling motions and then kind of the same thing. However, we're going to follow the same exact pattern we just did. We're just not going as far out as we did with our transition shade. So right now I'm going to stop this about here in the crease rather than coming all the way over into the inner corner. I'm going to bring this up onto the brow bone because, again, I have slightly hooded eyes. If I was just to leave that in my crease and open my eyes, it's gone, it's disappeared, you can't see it. So I'm going to blend what I have in my crease up onto the brow bone to, again, lift my eye, creating a new crease, and creating a new crease, but then you're also bringing this up so you can also see the tones of the blush and mauve tone as well. Again, you're just tricking the eye to create a new higher crease. And don't forget, we're also going to extend this out past the brow as well, just to continue the wide eye that we just created with that transition shade. And then you're just gonna kind of follow that up. I always buff over the edges of all of my shadows just to make sure that I have no harsh lines or anything like that, and everything will look super blended and seamless. Now that I have my transition and my crease shade on, what I like to do is go through and melt the two together, is what I guess I'm going to call it. But what I'm doing is just taking the shade Orange Soda. This is a really light wash of orange, but what it's going to do is warm up my eye look. It's gonna make my blue eyes pop because blue and orange are opposite on the color wheel. And then also that is going to really disguise any line between these two shadows. Clearly there is no line, but I just kind of got in the habit of this when I started teaching myself to do my makeup. So I grab a little bit of this, just swirl it in there. I already did, and then I tap off any excess. And then all I'm going to do is lightly just fluff this right on the brow bone, and the brow bone usually only. I just kind of do this, and again, it's just going to melt those two shadows together. It's gonna add a little bit of warmth to the eye look, and then if you have blue eyes, it's just going to make them pop just a little bit more. It also just kind of adds this like softened look to your eye look, and I absolutely love doing this. So if you're ever afraid of any kind of lines or anything like that throughout my makeup, I'll just use this big brush, and sometimes I won't add any extra. I just kind of use it to buff out any lines, so everything is literally super seamless. I'm going to use a BK 211 brush to add a little bit of depth in my outer corner, and for that I'm going to pick up the shade Mulberry right on the tip of the brush, just like this. Not too much. One, this is a dark shadow. You already have your face makeup done, so use a really small amount of this, tap off any excess, and then what I'm going to do is start applying this on the outer third right up into that crease. I'm having this really high up on that crease because again, we're trying to create an illusion that my crease is actually up here. So just to further out and really trick the eye, we're just going to extend this out and just create a little bit more depth here in the outer corner. I just use stippling motions until I get most of that product there, and then this is where I'm taking this out just a little bit and continuing that crease to the tail of my brow. Again, we're gonna follow the entire crease up like this onto the brow bone. Basically, I'm using my real eye and just recreating the crease up on the brow bone, if that makes sense. So I'm using the crease as my guide. Sorry, I had to make sure that I had that right, and I think I did. Okay, and then now I'm just going to slightly bring this above the brow bone to create the illusion that that is where the brow bone shadow is going to be. And then I'm just going to diffuse out this inner line just as far as I need to. There's not much makeup there. I just want to diffuse out that line so there's no harsh lines. Okay, and that is what the difference is going to be with that outer corner shadow. For my lid shadow, I am going to use my BK A502 brush, and I'm picking up the shade Tempera. Again, I'm going to use the side of this brush as well, just sweeping up some of that makeup. We're gonna tap off any excess, and then we're going to look our head back, and we're just going to place this right onto the lid. And I'm just gonna kind of move back and forth like little mush motions to get that right on the lid. And then I'm gonna start bringing that towards the entire inner corner. I'm gonna fill the entire inner corner with this shadow. And then I'm going to move it up into my actual natural crease like this. And then we can start those back and forth motions, just following your crease. Let your eye socket basically guide and lead you here. And we're gonna take this all the way over. We're gonna buff out this harsh line right here. We're not gonna try to add too much onto that outer corner on the lid, and then we're just gonna now fill the entire lid, and we're slowly going to buff this upward into the crease until it disappears that line. After I apply the lid shade, which is usually the lightest shade that I use for my eyes, it dims out the other shadows. So all I do is grab the brushes that I applied the other colors with, and I basically touch everything up in reverse. So I just use the same brushes, no additional product, and I'm just going to stipple them in the same areas that I already applied them on. So that was the outer corner. Here is my crease. I just kind of follow the same area. And then here is my transition shade, and I just kind of go over everything, and it just kind of revitalizes those other shades. Then what I'm gonna do is take my big fluffy brush again, go back into the shade Orange Soda, grab a little bit of that, tap it off, and fluff it to add a little bit more warmth back into the eye look. And that is it. Now I'm going to replicate everything on my lower lash line. I'm gonna glue on some lashes, and I'll come back to show you the finished look. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to follow me on my other social media pages, everything is linked up in the link tree in my bio. I will have all the products I used linked on LTK. I love you so much, and I'll see you in my next one.